Creating AI agents is becoming the easiest part. The more challenging section is how do we connect these agents that we're creating to our end users, or better to say, how do we connect these agents to front ends? Well, similar to how MCP became the new universal and standardized way of connecting tools to agents, and also similarly again how A2A became the new standardized way of connecting agent to agents, now we are going to have AGUI, which is now becoming the new standardized way of connecting agents to front ends and UI to give it access to end users. In this video, I'm going to share with you what is AGUI, or Agent User Interaction Protocol, how it is standardizing connecting agents to UI, what are the challenges it is trying to resolve, and what's the main value of using that. And to check that out in more details, to see also in action how it works through a demo. So stay with me and let's check it out. As you might have also experienced how challenging it is to connect all these multi-agent systems that you're creating to your UI or front end or your end users, there are no actually standardized way of doing that, just one best practice and one-time solution to have that connectivity being placed, regardless of what type of framework you are using to create AI agents and what is also the type of your front end. That's why recently we had this open source solution release called AGUI, which, as they noted here, it's a lightweight, event-based protocol that standardizes how AI agents connect to front-end applications. So how do they do that? Well, in order to see how, let's start with the root of this issue. As of now, as we discussed, there are too many different frameworks as they're evolving to create AI agents. Here, namely LangGraph, Crew AI, Google ADK, and also on the front-end side, we have different choices like React or Web. So these connectivities of choosing specific AI agent framework to a specific front-end app will require potentially its own way of creating the connector. So you have to set up your HTTP endpoint, your secure proxy here in place, and parsing your agent output to be able to render them to the front end is absolutely painful. So moving forward now, AGUI is going to standardize that, similar to how MCP did this for creating agent to connect them to tools, and A2A for connecting agent to agent. So let's see how AGUI does that for us. Well, first of all, the challenge of connecting agents to different front ends is just one specific cause of the reason of having AGUI. But beyond even that, agents need a specific actions or a specific sort of front-end capabilities. To give you an example, they need real-time streaming, because as these language models are generating tokens and streaming tokens, we have to be able to have a capability to show them on the front-end side. So it brings its specific need of agent for the front-end side, which is unique to itself. Second, sharing multiple state, because agents are collaboratively working with each other, so we should potentially share a session or a memory across agents, or maybe even from agent to the front end. They should also access to the same state of what the agent is doing, what's the current status of the agent, and what is the current status of the front end that we're showing to the user. So that's another unique need for front end of AI agents. Third one is tool orchestration, as agents call different nodes and different APIs, and they collaboratively work with each other. The UI must show also the progress. As you might have seen in Deep Research Agent, it shows you it is searching internet, crawling web, gathering the reports or citations, and then give you the final summary report back. So you see the visibility in the UI, what each agent is doing and how they are collaborating. And last but not least, framework sprawl, because as we discussed, each framework potentially talks in different dialects. They have their own sort of definition of agent, definition of creating nodes, definition of flow. So how do we translate those to a standardized front-end UI? These are potential specific needs of agents for UI and also the challenges. Now, what is the core architecture of AGUI that is trying to resolve this with having this universal way of connecting agents to the UI? Well, from high level, starting high level, and now we gradually go to the more details. You can just simply connect AGUI through direct or simple connection, or even for more specific or complex scenarios that you want to have more secure solution, you can do that through a secure proxy that we're going to discuss about. It can be through HTTP or WebSocket. It mainly support all transportational layers of connecting to an endpoint. Now, what's the secret? How AGUI ended up having this standardized solution? So AGUI started to think about what a different type of events happens when we call agent. Well, it's pretty simple. They said so far, to the best of what we know and what we have progressed from LLM and AI agent standpoint, we have around 16 type of events happens when we call an agent. Some events are life cycle. For example, we have an event called starting the session, ending the session, chat started, chat ended. These are different type of events that we have for managing the life cycle of an agent that interact. Or text message, as we discussed. Again, message started, ended. Tool call. If agent call a tool, then the tool call A got started. We got tool call response. Now tool call ended. These are sequence of events that happens when we call an agent. And lastly, the state. As we discussed, agent or agents, they have mutual states that they need to share across each other, and these also include some events. So in high level, we have 4 categories of the events. And underneath, we have around 16 type of events that AGUI is making them as a component and tell that, okay, these are the 16 events that agents will produce. So I just need these 16 to showcase and render them in the UI. So you don't need to do it again and again. Now, to be more specific of what are those around 16 events, I can show you here in the documentation. As we discussed, we have lifecycle events that the run started, finished, so, and even error. So these are, as of now, let's have it and make a deal of our standardized way of defining events with these naming conventions. So these are our lifecycle events. These are text messages events when text start, finish, and also when the agent call a tool, the tool get started. We have the arguments of the tool and the tool got end. Same here for the managing the state of the events. And even if in case we have special events that we need to define, you have also this option as well. So these are, as of now, what AGUI is telling us. This is the standard of having events. Now, with having events defined for us, now we are gradually going towards making a standardized solution. But is it just all about events? Well, events is one thing, and we have 2 more components that are the core of the architecture of AGUI. So first we discuss about events, but beside each event, let's say running a session or starting a message, that comes with also a JSON payload. That means if we have an event called message started, then what is the value of the message, or what's the text that getting generated? So we need a JSON payload to show the value of that event. And also a state, which is a shared JSON object that represent if a specific persistent context is needed to be shared across the interaction that we have it also in place. To give you an example, let's gradually see that communication with that potential JSON payload that I'm going to show you. So I already discussed about those 16 ones, but just recap them again. These are our standardized ground truth of different type of events. And with the explanation I found that maybe summarizing that is easier than following on the documentation. So you can keep it for the reference. But as of now, this is what is the standard solution. And here's an example. So this is a Python agent code that we have created by LangChain. This is actually pseudocode, not a working code. But you can see it's pretty simple. We are importing LangChain and we have a tool called getWeather. So obviously we're going to have an agent that when you ask information about weather of a city, it has tool that give you the weather information. Here, this is not a working agent, so it's always give you sunny, but just assume this is an agent that will respond to me through this tool. Now, because AGUI has already built-in integration with some of the agentic frameworks, including, for example, LangGraph, then as soon as I create the agent and I import also AGUI, it already starts to capture those events that we discussed, those 16 events, from the agent. So you don't need to redefine that or capture those events or parse those events. It's already defined through that integration that I'm going to talk about that more. So what happens on the right side, these events get streamed, the agent gets started, it's gonna call a tool which is get better. So we have this information through the payload that I told you, and then finally we have the results and then run finish. So as long as we have these four getting emitted from the backend agent, now I can showcase that to the front end. And this is now the standard. Now no one needs to recreate a code that generates this because AGUI do that for us. Now this was a LangString or LangGraph example. Great. So if we are going to use LangGraph, I always have these events and I can now connect to any front end. But does that work for all other type of frameworks that we create AI agents? Not there yet. So let me show you what frameworks are. Based on the time that I'm recording this video, as of now, these are a list of the frameworks that they have supported that, including LangGraph, Master, AGUI, AG2, AGNO, and Llama Index. Some of them are in progress and some of them are open to contributions. This is open source. It's like MCP that the community is building that up. So you're more than welcome to contribute to have that also included here for rest of the packages. But I'm gonna actually, by the end of the video, run one of them as a demo to show you in action how it works. So as we discussed, AGUI whole architecture is based on events that we emit them from the backend agent. Now, how do you look like when they become a payload, like a JSON, to send it to the front end? Here's an example. For example, we have an event that when we call the tool, so obviously we're going to have the type here, which is now the tool call. And then we have the actual payload that talks about, okay, what tool is calling that? What's the value to that tool? For example, the content is we're creating a final report. Optionally, if you want to have a shared state, for example, you want to tell the whole front end or whole agent that we are now in the stage of, or the step of writing a final report. And again, also optionally, you can have timestamp to be used as well. Now, let's see one quick demonstration of that in action. Let's say I have a research assistant, and when I trigger that from the UI, let's see what type of events get emitted from the backend agent with those supported frameworks, and then how they're going to be shown on potentially front end. So if I click on start, you will see that first it starts to create a run ID for me. Here it goes, so working, because we captured the current session of the conversation. And then gradually we have some delta. What delta means here, we are generating or streaming tokens. So we need to add on the top of previous tokens. That's why when we had here, it says AGUI, that's one token, for example, is an open source. So we are having this delta event streams coming in. And then it is telling me what's the current status, which is searching the sources. And then we have also an event that is called tool call, because we have a tool called web search that maybe does web scrolling or go through internet. And then we are still in the tool call because we're doing much more web research. All the way we are doing streaming, text chunks. So these are different type of events we discussed. And then lastly, we had the run finish that has the result success, and we got the response back. All right. So one other type of usage of AGUI is that for a lot of agents, we still need to have human in the loop being in place. That means we need to have human approve some potential steps that agent or some actions that agent gonna do. That's why it is very important that when agents want to do something, then how do we have human interaction from the front end? Well, good news, because in AGUI, one of the event that we have is tool call. We can have that as an action coming from a human. So that's a tool which talks about confirming an action by human. If we define that and the user says approve, then the tool results, which is an event defined by AGUI, gonna be approved. So you can also have that human-based event defined through tool call, which is defined both by AGUI. We already talked about a state, and which is a shared managed information across agent and front end. So we have two types of them that is defined by AGUI. One is when we have a whole complete snapshot of, as of now, what the agents are doing. For example, here, now we have a complete picture of the agent, which is like, it can be set initially or when we have a major change going to happen. For example, we have a user editing something. That's a whole context that we have a snapshot. But also we can have incremental, which we call it delta, as I told you. For example, we are incrementally updating a JSON that includes the message we're writing on the top of the previous message. So that's how we have that shared state as a delta. And lastly here, why AGUI is becoming that important, although it's still getting evolved. I believe it's not there yet for fully make it practical, but the reason I wanted to create this video as of now, because I believe potentially like MCP and A2A, this is becoming a new norm, but maybe the way of accessing that gonna be more practical. So first, it's gonna be universal compatibility. You wanna see that that's gonna be used regardless of what's your front end, what's the framework that you're creating agents. It still support human in the loop, because that's a big deal for a lot of AI agent developers to make sure still human can have observability and approval on top of what actions agents gonna do. As we discussed, it is supported in AGUI. It is pretty open. It's open source. You can also contribute, and it has also that real-time interactivity comes in from the front end, so you can interact with your agents from the real-time perspective as well, which is maybe the ideal optimal scenario of having human or end user interaction with agent. Before we go to the demo, I want to cover last more important component, which is already there are too many frameworks that is supported by AGUI, like LangGraph, Llama Index, but if you have your own specific framework that is not supported in AGUI because you have developed, or maybe you're using other open source agentic frameworks that are not in AGUI yet, then how do we create that standardized protocol of connecting our agents to the UI? So let's discuss. Before you start using AGUI, let's check that out. If it is already supported with the AI agent framework that you're using, because they keep adding that, maybe next time you're watching this video, it's already there. If it's not there, then you need to build your integration by yourself. Then how do I build that? You have two ways, as it is noted on AGUI documentation that I was reading. First, you need to have, the first approach is through server implementation. So what is server implementation? This is the time that when you are creating a new agent from scratch, maybe you have your own AI agent framework that you're developing. So you have that permission or flexibility of defining the agent from scratch, and you want to have the maximum flexibility of controlling agent front end and this AGUI created for you as a standard. If not, and if you don't have direct control of the agent that is created and you don't have that flexibility there, the middleware implementation maybe is something better choice for you, because this will respect however agent is created, just it becomes like a translator to convert your current agent actions to events that is AGUI friendly and then can be rendered in your front end. So the difference of that is, like for this one, when you actually create a whole new restaurant from scratch, whole new kitchen to serve your customers. But here's the middleware implementation is, you can actually, is like when you hire a waiter or waitress to serve your client in the restaurant instead of rebuilding the kitchen. All right, let's be a little bit more specific on these two approaches, starting with the first one, what is server implementation. So here's an example. I want to actually have a client request, which is me as a user in the front end. I want to ask something that this should go and call an endpoint that is talking with my agent and then get the response string back. Because you are creating everything from scratch, so you need to release or edit those events that I talk, which are AGUI friendly. So that's why here's an example. You need to have an async generator function that yields those events. Here, for example, we gotta have a chatbot that chat, but we need to also have those events too. So we'll create this agentic chat endpoint that the front end will call that endpoint. And you can see that here I am also yielding those events that are AGUI definition as our standard. That's why I want to have this in place as my agentic backend to make sure this is AGUI compatible. So that was for the first approach. But for the middleware one, which the one that you're going to act like a bridge of connecting your current agent that you don't want to manipulate and customize it to the front end. So let's see an example of that. So you will see that here for the same example, I'm not going to create a chat agentic endpoint. I am going to respect whatever agent that I have as is, but I'm going to extend that with having this new abstract agent class that returns observable, that is pushing those AGUI events through observer next. So to give you an example here, right now I am extending that agent through this abstract agent, and then you can see that I am also returning the same type of events we discussed in AGUI now through this observer next. So what it does, it's actually using your agent as is, but based on the output and activity of that agent, it is creating this event as a translator to send it to the front end and make it AGUI friendly. All right, now let's see some working demos in action. The very first one, before I deploy one in my computer, the one that I want to show you is the one with LangGraph. So if I click on the demo here, not only you can actually install that with just one line, npx. By the way, Copilot Kit, if in case you're wondering what is this is actually an open source front end for AI agents, and the same team actually came up with the AGUI idea. That's why it is now the example is using Copilot Kit as a front end, but you are more than welcome to use any type of other front end. Here, Copilot Kit is just an example of front end to show AGUI in action. So what happens when you deploy that? Here we have different type of agentic actions. One agent, for example, here I have just a simple chatbot agent. I can ask something like change the background to pink yellow gradient, and you could see that it made the action. So now I was able to, from the front end, interact with the agent. Now, instead of me creating that connectivity of the front end, parsing, doing HTTP call to the backend agent, I am standardizing that through AGUI. So let's see that in code. If I click on the code, you can see that I have my agent.py, which is simply a LangChain LangGraph agent. And I'm also, again, importing Copilot Kit because that's the choice of what I'm using for the front end perspective. But if I click on the page tsx file, you will see that I have something called Copilot Kit. This is actually the gateway of connecting agent to the front end through AGUI, because what happens is that Copilot Kit or Agent UI here is opening up this path and tunnel for me. So through this, it is streaming all those events of what my agent is doing, the run started, run ended, and also here I am defining the action which is changing the background. And because LangGraph was one of those supported ones with my AGUI, you don't see that I am defining the definition of all these events for me. It's already done by the open source community. That's why with just simply importing this, I was able to have that interaction of front end and the backend agent. There are different type of agent actions here. For example, we have human in the loop. If you might have seen some agents when you ask a question like a deep research agent, first it comes with a plan and asks from you, are you happy with this plan before you start? You say yes or no. For example, if I ask I want a plan go to Mars, it comes up with this plan. It's asking me that, are you okay if I perform this step? So this is one of those events support as we discussed through AGUI. There are much more examples. Yes, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the one that I'm going to deploy by myself is AGUI. So let's go to the docs and see how we can actually implement that or install AGUI. So if you click on Quick Start here, first of all, you need to have your LLM choice. Let's say if you want to use OpenAI or Gemini, you have to have your key. You have to have Node.js installed and also pip. That means you have to also obviously have Python installed. So here I gonna run this command line, which is cloning this repository and having my agent developed by AGUI as a framework for developing my agents defined, and then how we can connect that to AGUI. So let me copy this and run in my environment. All right, here's my terminal. I have created a virtual environment just in case. So I am pasting that and let's hit enter. So you'll see that it just finished importing all those packages. And if I go to my folder that I ran this command line, you will see that I have my Copilot Kit AGUI starter got downloaded. So let's see what it is. If I go under agent.py, this is simply just defining an agent for me through AGUI, which can be also LangGraph as we saw, for having an agent that has tools for getting access, I think, to some stock prices using Y Finance tools. So you can see that I have this tool defined, and then my agent, which is our investment analysis agent, that has some access information about the stock prices. And this is just simply an agent.py, and we're going to actually have that running as our backend endpoint to call that through AGUI. Now, talking about AGUI, we need to install a couple of things more. So the next thing that you need to install is just typing npm install. It's getting installed. All right, just finished installing npm, and as you can see, it captured a lot of node modules downloaded for me. I'm not going through all of that for now, but the next step is we install npm run install agent. Now, what does install agent mean? What this command line is supposed to do? So if you click on package.json, which you should have after following all the steps, Here you can see a list of actions that are embedded with this command line. So if I go with install agent, which is the one that we are running right now, it does cd agent, so it goes to my agent directory and then do pip install. That means it's just going to create the environment ready for running that agent. So you're going to run that and it's done. And last step before you forget, make sure you add your language model key added as an environment value. If it's Gemini or OpenAI, make sure you add that in the terminal. I already have mine, so I'm not going to do it again for this. Alright, I just clean my terminal to make it a little bit clean, but now I want to go actually to show you the same page TSX file that I showed you on LangGraph example demo. You can see that similarly we have this Copilot sidebar here. This is the one that we're going to have not only our chatbot start working, but this one also will open the stream of all those AGUI events that we discussed about from my Ango agent all the way go to the front end. And because this package is one of those supported ones, I do not need to create that integration here, which is awesome. So now what I'm going to do, I want to just start everything. We just type in npm run dev. So let's type that here, npm run dev. And by the way, if you're wondering what does run dev here mean, I'm going to go back again to the package JSON. And here's dev. So this one do multiple things at the same time. First, it run dev UI, and again, dev UI here is next dev, which is running our actually backend agent, which dev agent is going to the agent path and calling that agent.py. Technically, this line is both launching our backend, frontend that let them talk through AGUI. So let's run it and see what's gonna happen. Alright, now it is running both my AI agent and also the front end. You can see that after running agent.py, this is the local path that I have my agent running, which is on port 800. And then I have my UI that is running on port 3000. Sorry, 8000 and 3000. And I just click on the 3000, which is running my UI. And this is what I face up with. So again, Copilot Kit was just a front-end example. It's also the front end you see is just one way of interacting with agent. It's not a must-to-have. This is just come with a demo. And here I have my agent that I can interact with. So I can ask something like, let's go with maybe the same example here. What's the current price of this stock index? So let me move on a little bit so you can see that in action. So there you go. It is working and gave me the response back. But also because of all those event streams that we discussed about, it is telling me in the steps of when the tool got started and the status of that and the full details of that JSON payload of that event. So this was just a quick demonstration that I was able to access to all these events that my agents are working and get them rendered and make actions through the front end. And with having this standardized approach in place, getting also added to all those agent frameworks like Google ADK potentially coming in that I saw that in list of in progress, you no longer need to deal with developing all these transportation layers of HTTP parsing, events capturing to render them in the front end as a bridge to let your end users connect to agents. Alright, that was all about AGUI. Again, I figured out that the concept is getting evolved, so the practicality of that is slightly challenging. But it's like MCP and A2A, which was the same thing at the beginning, but now you see like specifically MCP, it's pretty simple now to integrate that for having tools accessible for agents. And I believe with AGUI is coming in soon, so you will hear much more about it down the road. So I thought that maybe it's good to plant the seed as of now to let you have this awareness of it's coming in and potentially can explore it further and add your own contribution in the open source GitHub repo, which I will add it to the Discord channel on the video description below. Go there on the reference section. You'll see all the references that I discussed about them in the video. I hope you enjoy. I appreciate if you click on like icon and share your thoughts or questions in the comment section. And make sure you subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Thank you so much.